Let me begin by acknowledging the original inhabitants and the spiritual custodians of our land. And because it's a queer conference, let me also acknowledge the people who came before us. We have a movement that goes back over 100 years to the beginnings of organisations in Germany. And listening to Edwin reminded me that I also want to acknowledge the very many friends, comrades, colleagues who died from HIV and whose presence still echoes for me in this hall. In summing up, I want to just make two specific comments that come out of discussions this morning or today, and then I want to try and bring together a theme. I was struck listening to people talking about religion by the comment that a friend of mine made in India, in Mumbai, when the law 377 was repealed finally. And Ashok said, the one thing that brings our religious leaders together is to hate us. The other comment I would make refers to pinkwashing. When I came to Sydney, I flew with Qantas, who very nicely gave me Pride cookies on the flight up. My question to Qantas is, how do you reconcile that pride with the reality that Qantas has a close alliance with Emirates, an airline that is the state airline of a regime that represses us? The line I wanted to begin with tonight was simply, any city that can host a World Pride does not need it. Put it simply, let us imagine a World Pride, for example, in Quito, in Zagreb, in Manila. It would be a very different sort of World Pride, but it would have a very different meaning. We've been talking a lot about the first World Pride in the Southern Hemisphere. At the reception of the town hall, I saw a map on which people put stars from where they came. And as far as I can tell, there are more people here from the northeast of the United States than there are from the entire continents of Africa and South America. If we took seriously the Southern Hemisphere, then let us actually reach out and do everything we can to involve them. But of course, I recognise, and this is not a criticism of the organisers, in most parts of the world, as Edwin stressed, our community is under pressure. And what I really want us to think about is the need to think strategically about the connection between political and religious authoritarianism and growing persecution of people on the basis of their sexuality or gender identity. Think, for example, of the unholy alliance between President Putin and the Russian Orthodox Church. Think of the role of evangelical churches in Latin America and in East Africa. Think of the awful situation for so many queer people under Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. And what I think we need is to go beyond the experience, the lived experience of which people have spoken so eloquently this week. We need to think strategically, we need to build alliances, and we need to think politically in a broad sense, because the world faces an upsurge of fundamentalism. And whether it's political fundamentalism or religious fundamentalism, it threatens all of us. And this is the challenge, I think, that this conference has made so clear to so many of us over the last couple of days. As an Australian, I'm of course delighted that my government has finally decided we should recognise specifically the need to support LGBTQ organisations and community groups in the region, although I would point out that actually is not new. Australia did that 30 years ago in the origins of the HIV epidemic. And I was delighted to see our Foreign Minister speak eloquently about the need for regional advocacy. But as an Australian, I think there is a special role that we have, and I'm deliberately taking us forward to what will be, I think, one of the key plenaries of this session tomorrow. And that is our role as a place in which people who are persecuted for their sexuality or their gender identity can seek asylum. And I want to I speak in a sense from the heart. I am in Australia because I am the son of Jewish refugees who were able to find asylum in Australia. I am so conscious of how difficult successive governments have made it for people who need to find security, who are fleeing not the wrong use of pronouns or a nasty epithet. They are literally fleeing murder, torture and rape. And my great fear with the growth of religious authoritarianism across the world is that more people are going to flee. We haven't heard anything, for understandable reasons, in this conference about the plight of queer people, for example, in Myanmar, in the middle of a very repressive civil unrest. But I want to tell you about something that to me sums up what is, I think, meaningful and important response that goes far beyond the recognition by special envoys or politicians or ministers. I come from Melbourne. I know it's a long way away, and I recognise that we are not, as Sydney is, the centre of the world. But I live in Melbourne, and in Rupert Street, Collingwood, there is a drop-in centre for queer refugees and asylum seekers. 200 people now are accessing a whole range of services. They are coming there for support. They're coming there for help with the complicated visa restrictions that we have in this country. They're coming there for referrals to health services. They're coming there for skills, for language training, sometimes fleeing domestic violence or homelessness. To me, this sums up what is, I think, the missing gap in our government's response. We need to say publicly, we welcome, we understand and we welcome people to this country who are fleeing asylum. And we understand that people flee asylum because of who they are, who they love, and dare I say, who they have sex with, which is not something that has often been said at this conference. And let me end, and this is going to sound, I hope, not too uncharitable. If the proceeds from one of the big parties during World Pride were to be made available, we could have a drop-in centre like Rupert Street in another city in Australia. And as a patron of the Pride Foundation and as a remarkably proud and happy supporter of both FDPN and Many Coloured Sky, let me urge you to think of that next time you pay out $200 to go to a dance party.